Hello, sisters and brothers. Our devotional for today, for June 22, is a reflection on My Utmost for His Highest, a series of devotionals written and compiled by Oswald Chambers. You can always find the link for the daily devotional at utmost.org. And today's devotional returns to something that we looked at just a few days ago when we read the passage from Matthew 7 about judging others. And I'm going to read the first 5 verses of Matthew 7, and then we'll dive into the devotional. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Chambers titles the devotional for today, The Unchanging Law of Judgment, looking at verse 2 from the passage we just read. This statement is not some haphazard theory, but it is an eternal law of God. Whatever judgment you give will be the very way you are judged. There is a difference between retaliation and retribution. Jesus said that the basis of life is retribution. With the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. If you have been shrewd in finding out the shortcomings of others, remember that will be exactly how you will be measured. The way you pay is the way life will pay you back. This eternal law works from God's throne down to us. See Psalm 18, 25 and 26. Romans 2 verse 1 applies it in even a more definite way by saying that the one who criticizes another is guilty of the very same thing. God looks not only at the act itself, but also at the possibility of committing it, which he sees by looking at our hearts. To begin with, we do not believe the statement of the Bible. For instance, do we really believe the statement that says we criticize in others the very things we are guilty of ourselves? The reason we see hypocrisy, deceit, and a lack of genuineness in others is that they are all in our own hearts. The greatest characteristic of a saint is humility, as evidenced by being able to say honestly and humbly, yes, all those, as well as other evils, would have been exhibited in me if it were not for the grace of God. Therefore I have no right to judge. Jesus said, "Judge not, that you be not judged." He went on to say, in effect, if you do judge, you will be judged in exactly the same way. Who of us would dare to stand before God and say, "My God, judge me as I have judged others"? We have judged others as sinners. If God should judge us in the same way, we would be condemned to hell. Yet God judges us on the basis of the miraculous atonement by the cross of Christ. So just as we talked about a few days ago when we talked about beware of criticizing others, Chambers again reminds us that what we are noticing in others, what we are identifying, and what we are criticizing and judging are really things that exist within us. And I've found that to be especially true of myself lately, as some of the polarizing conversations have been happening. And I find that in many ways I'm arguing with my old self. When someone brings up something, I'm really arguing against what I used to think, but in some ways that still remains in me. And of course the social work line is, if you spot it, you got it. And so the things that I'm trying to identify in someone else and argue against, those have been in me. And I need to focus on what I ought to do and how I ought to respond to that, rather than responding with a harsh or critical spirit. And I'm reminded of one of the most godly men I've ever known who, when he was leading a Bible study that I was participating in, we were lamenting a mass shooting that had happened. I believe it was the one that happened at Virginia Tech at the time. And we started to have this conversation about why these things happened and how terrible and evil it was. And our leader just kind of put us all in our place, and he reminded us that we all have that same capacity for evil. We all have that same capacity to respond in terrible, horrible, horrific ways. And it's only by the grace of God that we don't. So before we begin to jump and criticize someone, we need to take a pause, and we need to remember that Jesus said we will be measured and in the same way. And I want to be measured by grace, so I need to be willing to measure others with grace as well. I hope this encouraged you. Be safe. Thank you for listening. Stay well.